In late 2019, Riot Games launched Riot Forge, a publishing label designed to fund indie studios to create single-player League of Legends spin-offs. The goal was to let experienced indie developers tell their own stories within the world of Runeterra, giving fans of the League universe more narrative-driven experiences beyond the core competitive game. The idea wasn't to chase massive profits, but to support creative freedom and offer something new to League's fans. Over the next 4 years, Riot Forge published 6 games before being shut down in early 2024 as part of Riot's wider layoffs and restructuring. Riot admitted that some of its bigger bets hadn't delivered the returns they'd hoped for, and Forge was one of the casualties. On paper, each Riot Forge release brought something different to the table. RPGs, rhythm games, Metroidvanias, all dressed in League of Legends aesthetics. But look a little closer, and something starts to feel familiar. Were these really original games? Or just reskinned versions of indie hits the developers had already made? Let's break down each title and see how closely it mirrors its developers' past work. It all started with Ruined King, a turn-based RPG set in the pirate-infested alleys of Bilgewater and the haunted ruins of the Shadow Isles. It was developed by Airship Syndicate, the same team behind Battle Chasers Nightwar, a cult-favorite RPG inspired by Joe Madureira's comic of the same name. And here's where things get interesting. Structurally, Ruined King and Battle Chasers are nearly identical. Both are top-down, party-based RPGs where you navigate through overworld maps and dive into dungeons, switching into turn-based battles whenever enemies appear. Same 3-character party system, same dungeon crawling loop. Even the UI and map layout feel like déjà vu, just with different coats of paint. Combat-wise, Ruined King lifts the core mechanics directly from Battle Chasers' tactical, turn-based fighting, a shared initiative timeline, and ability-driven strategy. The main difference, instead of Garrison, Calibretto, and Red Monica, you're commanding Ahri, Yasuo, and Misfortune. Sure, there are tweaks, dynamic lighting, field swapping, and a few more modern touches, but the foundation is unmistakably Battle Chasers in a League cosplay. And that's not a dig. Airship Syndicate knew what they were doing, and Riot Forge likely picked them because they had a polished RPG formula ready to go. But let's not pretend Ruined King is a radically new experience. It's more like Battle Chasers 2.0. But hey, maybe you're thinking, okay, sure, Ruined King borrowed a lot from Battle Chasers. That doesn't mean the whole lineup's just reskins, right? Next up is Hexte Mayhem, a chaotic rhythm platformer starring Ziggs, League's favorite bomb-obsessed Yordle. Instead of traditional platforming, Ziggs auto-runs through the streets of Piltover, and your job is to jump, dash, and explode to the beat. Sound familiar? It should, because this is almost exactly the formula behind the BIT.TRIP Runner series. The comparisons run deep. Both Runner and Hextech Mayhem feature auto-scrolling levels where precision-timed button presses sync with music. You've got color-coded cues, momentum-based chaining, and even optional freestyle moves that reward extra flair, a trademark feature of the Runner series. Swap out Commander Video for Ziggs, and you've basically got the same core game loop. To be fair, the presentation is very Riot, full of polished visuals, explosive effects, and League's signature humor, but at its heart, Hextech Mayhem is BIT.TRIP Runner with a Yordle skin and more things blowing up. Here's where things start to shift. Of all the Riot Forge titles, Convergence might just be the most distinct from its developers' past work, even if some familiar DNA is still under the surface. Convergence is a 2D Metroidvania starring Echo. The game blends exploration, platforming, and a clever time rewind mechanic into a focused solo adventure through Zon. It leans into the classic Metroidvania formula, navigating interconnected zones, unlocking new abilities, and returning to previously inaccessible areas. This is a far cry from Speed Brawl, the game that put developer Double Stallion on the map. Speed Brawl is a momentum-driven brawler with a distinct arcade flair. The game isn't about exploration, it's about speed-running combat, chaining attacks, and keeping the action flowing. That said, Convergence still shares a strong family resemblance. The two games are stylistically near twins. Bold comic book visuals, slick animation, and exaggerated character designs. The combat in Convergence also carries traces of Speed Brawl's DNA. Fast, responsive attacks, fluid movement, and combo chaining that rewards precision and aggressive play. Echo's moveset, especially when upgraded, feels like a solo take on that same high-speed, combo-heavy style. The biggest shift is structure. Where Speed Brawl was linear and score-based, Convergence is built around exploration and narrative. So while it's not just Speed Brawl with a League skin, the influence is clear, especially once the punches start flying. In the end, Convergence feels like a proper evolution of Double Stallion's style with the same speed and flair, but with a bit more brain behind the brawl. So at this point, maybe you're thinking, alright, sure, some of these games echo their creators' past work, but at least Convergence tried something new, right? The same can be said about the Mage Seeker, a top-down action RPG set in Demacia, where you play as Silas, a rebel mage, spell thief, and all-around chaos machine. You charge through enemy lines, yank magic straight from your foes, and bring an uprising to life one stolen spell at a time. The game was developed by Digital Sun, the team behind Moonlighter, a critically acclaimed indie RPG that blended dungeon crawling with shopkeeping. And while the Mage Seeker ditches the whole store management half of the equation, the connection between the two games becomes crystal clear once the combat kicks in. Both Moonlighter and Mage Seeker share a similar pixel art visual style, fast-paced combat with quick slashes and smooth dodges, as well as challenging boss fights. They both emphasize loot collection and upgrading gear to improve your chances in battle. However, Moonlighter is a roguelite focused on dungeon crawling, gathering loot, selling it, and rebuilding the village of Renoka. In contrast, the Mageseeker is a story-driven action RPG centered on Silas and the political intrigue of Demacia. Instead of just looting, Silas's combat revolves around stealing enemy abilities mid-fight and using his chains to turn their powers against them. At the end of the day, it feels like Digital Sun took the bones of Moonlighter, ripped out the shop system, injected some revolutionary spirit, and handed Silas the keys to their combat engine. The result? A leaner, meaner version of their old formula. Alright, so at this point you could argue we're 2 for 2. Ruined King and Hextech Mayhem feel like straight-up reskins of their developers' past games, while Convergence and the Mage Seeker at least try to remix the formula into something new. Now, let's take a look at Song of NooNoo, a heartfelt puzzle platformer that follows NooNoo and his Yeti companion, Willump, on a journey across the icy landscapes of the Freljord. Instead of combat or fast-paced gameplay, this one leans heavily into emotion, atmosphere, and environmental puzzles. And if that sounds familiar, it's because it comes from Tequila Works, the studio behind the critically acclaimed adventure game Rime, and the resemblance is hard to miss. In Rime, a silent child and a fox companion explore a mysterious island, solving puzzles and uncovering fragments of a story told through visuals and music. Song of NooNoo echoes that exact formula. A boy and a creature navigate frozen ruins, solve environmental puzzles, and use music, literally NooNoo plays a flute, to activate the world around them. The mechanics, pushing blocks, platforming across gaps, and solving music-based puzzles feel very much like a spiritual sequel wrapped in a League skin. Visually, Song of NooNoo swaps out Rime's Mediterranean sunshine for snowy vistas, but the tone remains the same, a quiet, almost meditative journey, built on companionship and discovery. Tequila Works didn't just port Rime into the Freljord, but the DNA is undeniably present. Their creative director even noted that NooNoo's childlike perspective was central to the design. So while Song of NooNoo does add its own flavor, more personality from its characters, more world building from Runeterra, it still walks in the same footprints Tequila Works laid back in 2017. And honestly, that's not a bad thing. And finally, we have Bandal Tale, a cozy life sim and resource management game where you help a Yordle rebuild and care for a whimsical village. Behind the scenes is Lazy Bear Games, a Russian indie studio best known for Graveyard Keeper, a darkly funny farming and management sim about running a medieval graveyard. Gameplay-wise, Bandal Tale and Graveyard Keeper share the same DNA. Both are top-down management sims where you gather resources, craft items, tend to your plots, and build relationships with quirky characters who unlock new technologies and upgrades. The core gameplay loop, harvest, craft, build, repeat, is a near-perfect reskin of Graveyard Keeper's formula. Put simply, Bandal Tale is Graveyard Keeper Yordle Edition. Looking at all 6 Riot Forge titles, a clear pattern emerges. Each game strongly resembles a previous hit from its developers. It's almost like Riot Forge said, "Give us the game you already know how to make, but with League champions." And in most cases, that's exactly what happened. From turn-based RPGs to rhythm platformers and cozy life sims, each studio brought their signature style and essentially repurposed it for Runeterra. The result? Entertaining genre games, no doubt, but often feeling more like expansions or spiritual sequels to the devs' earlier projects, rather than groundbreaking new designs. Now, none of this is a knock on the dev teams themselves. These are indie studios with their own creative voices and trusted gameplay formulas. If anything, having Riot's brand and budget likely gave them the freedom to polish what they do best. The cynical take? Riot Forge produced League skins. The kinder, more understanding view? These smart developers faced time and budget constraints, and naturally leaned on what worked. After all, creating entirely new genres from scratch is risky, especially under deadlines. With Riot Forge now closed, we're left with a classic what-if scenario. We saw a collection of polished mini-games set in Runeterra, but most relied heavily on proven blueprints. Is that tragic, or just smart business? That depends on your perspective. Maybe future projects or a revived Riot Forge 2.0 will push the envelope further. For now, all we can do is watch, play, and wonder what's next for League spin-offs. If you enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to subscribe. I'm aiming for 10,000 subs by the end of the year, and with your help, we can forge some real progress. And hey, if this video sparked your interest, check out this one next.